Story 1. I remember many Americans were surprised to learn that Hugh Laurie, who played Dr. Gregory House on the television series House, was British. Story 2. David Tennant played the antagonist in Jessica Jones. I only knew him as the 10th Doctor, so seeing him be so genuinely menacing was a shock to the system. Story 3. Leslie Nielsen, the actor who starred in the hilarious Airplane and the Naked Gun films, was someone I only associated with wacky comedies. Then one night, I watched a 1970s detective show in which he played a serious role as a cold-blooded killer. He did a good job, but I kept expecting him to break into a sight gag. Story 4. The actor who plays Kevin on The Office is very normal out of character and sounds completely different. It shows how much he transforms to play Kevin. Story 5. At the time, most people were not familiar with Leonardo DiCaprio, and when What's Eating Gilbert Grape was released, they were surprised that he was only acting. Story 6. Stephanie Beatriz from Brooklyn Nine-Nine. The first time I saw her interviewed, I realized that the character she played when she was undercover as a hairdresser was actually her, and the rest of the time in the show she was playing someone who was not her. Story 7. Gary Oldman. I'd only ever seen him in The Fifth Element. When he played Sirius Black, I wondered why they had cast an American in that role. Later, I saw him in an interview and was surprised. Story 8. Dacre Montgomery is the complete opposite of his character Billy Hargrove in Stranger Things. Story 9. Louise Fletcher was superb in any role in which she could portray an evil sociopath. She won an Academy Award for her portrayal of Nurse Ratched, but I remember her most as Kai Wynn on Star Trek Deep Space Nine. She played a smarmy character. I had the pleasure of meeting her twice at a couple of Star Trek conventions she attended. She was an absolute marshmallow of a person, sweet, soft, and kind. Everyone who worked with her has said similar things. Story 10. The Penguin. I kept switching between interviews with Colin Farrell and the show The Penguin. It was hard to see the same person in that character. I was amazed. Not just a different attitude or situation. It was a completely different person from the ground up. Well done, Colin. Story 11. Hugh Jackman and Hugh Laurie were so convincing in Logan and House that I had no idea they were not American. Laurie was so good that I did not realize I had already seen him in 101 Dalmatians. Story 12. Jake Gyllenhaal in Nightcrawler was extremely unsettling. Story 13. Stephanie Beatriz. When she uses her fake sunny voice as Rosa, it can sound almost unhinged, but that is how she talks in real life. Story 14. Jesse Plemons was for a long time the lovable, goofy friend on Friday Night Lights. He later began delivering intense, sometimes unhinged villain performances. He is a highly talented actor. Story 15. Kunal Nair in Criminal United Kingdom. If you only know him as the sweet, sensitive, nerdy Raj from The Big Bang Theory, you will not be prepared for his performance as a cold, unhinged sociopath. His performance is genuinely chilling, and his angry outbursts have more impact than the much tamer ones Raj displayed on The Big Bang Theory. On that show, he rarely raised his voice and never swore. In Criminal, he yells, pounds a table, swears, punctuates his sentences forcefully, and sports a beard. Story 16. Leonard Nimoy in other television roles surprised me. I was so used to him as Spock that seeing him smile or play a different character took a moment. Story 17. John Lithgow in the television series Dexter. I have not been able to look at him the same since. Story 18. Walton Goggins. From Boyd Crowder to every other role, he is a next-level actor who is seriously overlooked. Story 19. John Goodman in Barton Fink was terrifying. I had only known him as a comedian. Story 20. Christopher Judge. I know him as the serious, stoic warrior Teal'c, but he is actually smiley, genuine, and funny. He is the complete opposite. Story 21. Katie Sagal blew my mind in Sons of Anarchy. I grew up with her as Peggy Bundy and, of course, as Leela. Nicole Kidman in Destroyer is another example. The plot is somewhat flimsy, but her performance is really impressive. Story 22. Timothy Olyphant in Santa Clarita Diet was hilarious. I had only seen him in grisly gunslinger roles, and oh my god, I had never laughed so hard at someone I had thought was not a comedian. Story 23. It was a bit surprising when John Krasinski, known for playing Jim on The Office, became an action star, but he is really quite good. Story 24. Nick Offerman is nothing like Ron Swanson except for woodworking. Anthony Starr is nothing like Homelander. He deserves an Emmy for that role. Story 25. David Schwimmer in Band of Brothers was shocking. Going from the awkward, goofy Ross to a serious, no-nonsense drill sergeant made me think, what on earth is Ross doing here? Story 26. Anthony Starr is the exact opposite of Homelander, which is obviously a good thing. He is a softer-spoken, goofy Kiwi man with dark brown hair. The first time I saw him out of character was on a Hot Ones segment. I was blown away by how incredible his acting was as Homelander, and the shift in mannerisms, accent, and speech was remarkable. Story 27. Rosa from Brooklyn Nine-Nine. In the first interview I saw with her, I was so shocked at how different her voice sounds. Story 28. Having first seen him as Jeff Spicoli, I was surprised that Sean Penn came across as generally humorless. Story 29. I had never seen or heard of Idris Elba before The Wire and The Office. Story 30. Daniel Day-Lewis could have sat next to me on the subway 1,000 times and I would not have realized I was beside Bill the Butcher, Hawkeye, Lincoln, or any of his characters. Story 31. Have you ever seen Larry the Cable Guy out of character? Even his accent was embellished for the role. It is the same with Pee Wee Herman. Larry the Cable Guy and Andy Kaufman stayed in character for interviews and promotions. I doubt we have ever seen the real Andy Kaufman. Story 32. Nichelle Nichols, also known as Lieutenant Uhura from Star Trek, plays a vengeful, foul-mouthed madam in the 1970s blaxploitation classic Truck Turner. Isaac Hayes is the star, but she steals the movie. Story 33. I am not sure this qualifies, but when I saw Rowan Atkinson as Maigret, a very dark French police detective, it astonished me. After watching Blackadder, Mr. Bean, and all his silly faces and voices, seeing him play a quiet, dark character with no comic moments was remarkable. As John Lovitz used to exclaim on Saturday Night Live, acting! Story 34. Zac Efron as Ted Bundy in Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil and Vile is a startling departure from his roles in High School Musical and The Greatest Showman. It suggests that child actors sometimes take dark roles, even portraying a murderer, to break their child actor image. Story 35. Ralph Fiennes as Voldemort is one of the best portrayals of a malignant antagonist in cinematic history. You can dislike Harry Potter as a franchise, but you cannot dislike Voldemort as a character or Ralph Fiennes for bringing him to life. Also, Mark Hamill as the Joker way back when. Story 36. I had no idea Ryan Quanten from True Blood was Australian. Story 37. Seeing Cara G, who plays drummer in The Expanse, doing interviews with other cast members was a shock. I did not expect her to be that character, but she can be so adorable and goofy off-screen. A YouTube video titled The Expanse Cast reveals their true selves. We do not talk about Alex. Story 38. I had only ever seen Martin Clunes in Dr. Martin, so it was a shock when he was all smiles on chat shows instead of dour and grouchy. Story 39. Having known him as the goofy, insecure dad on Third Rock from the Sun, John Lithgow gave an unexpectedly convincing performance as a psycho in one season of Dexter. He was deadpan and completely unhinged, so convincing that you begin to wonder whether it does make sense to be killing these people. Despite expectations, wacky hijinks did not ensue. Story 40. Tom Hiddleston nailed his role as Loki. In interviews he is friendly, laughing, and playful. His performances in Crimson Peak and High Rise are serious and contrasting. Story 41. I never thought I would like Sam Rockwell after The Green Mile. Story 42. I watched Game of Thrones with Emilia Clarke as Daenerys and thought she was commanding and serious. Then I found out she is a goofy and somewhat shy person. Story 43. James Gandolfini in The Sopranos and how much his portrayal of Tony Soprano cost him. Story 44. I forget his name, but he plays Enzo on The Vampire Diaries. I always forget he is not actually English. Similarly, the actor who played Spike in Buffy is not English either. Story 45, Joseph Morgan, who played Klaus Michelson on The Vampire Diaries and the originals. Story 46. I watched Idris Elba as Stringer Bell in The Wire and thought, wait, he is British? Story 47, Alan Ritchson. The contrast between his real-life personality and that of Jack Reacher is amazing. Story 48. I only knew Ryan Eggold from the television series New Amsterdam, but this week I binged a new series on Amazon Prime Video called Cross, and oh my god, I have no opinions about the characters. I do not want to spoil anything. Story 49. Gary Oldman plays a Rastafarian gangster in True Romance. Story 50. Sam Rockwell in 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. Story 51. Jack Gleason, the actor who played King Joffrey Baratheon, is reportedly very kind and relaxed. Story 52. I first saw John Lithgow as a bad guy in Cliffhanger. He was scary, which made it very difficult to accept him as a goofball in Third Rock from the Sun. Story 53. Mel Gibson's performance as Macbeth blew my mind because his execution of the role was fantastic. It was so different from the Mad Max films, and I never knew he was such a capable actor. Story 54. Jeff Anderson nailed Randall Graves so well that I was shocked to learn his real personality was nothing like the character. Story 55. Tropic Thunder was my first exposure to Robert Downey Jr., but that feels like cheating. Other than that, hearing Christian Bale's real accent threw me for a serious loop as a kid. Story 56. Dominic West is the poshest person in the world. He literally lives in a castle. He played Jimmy McNulty in The Wire, Fred West, and Noah Soloway. What an actor. Story 57. My sister and I watched Rob Roy with Liam Neeson. The next day she was watching the comedy film High Spirits and yelled for me. When I came to see what she was yelling about, she asked in bewilderment if I knew the man who was playing Martin, the ghost. I had no idea, but he was a long-legged, good-looking actor with perfect comedic timing. I stayed to watch the rest of the movie, and when the credits rolled, both of us said in unison, in disbelief, Liam Neeson? We became fans for life. Story 58. Sean Penn said watching Jeff Spicoli in Bad Boys was pretty wild. Story 59. Hugh Laurie as House. Have you seen him in British comedy sketches? I cannot believe he portrayed the character so well. It would be like Rodney Dangerfield nailing the role of the Godfather. Story 60. I met the wrestler Kane Glenn Jacobs around 2000. He was a normal guy, which was jarring because back then wrestlers still clung to blurring the lines between reality and character and often stayed in character even off camera. I also met Tez just after he entered the World Wrestling Federation. He was doing an appearance and was very friendly. He gave me a giant bag of M&Ms. I was about 13 or 14, and when he asked if I liked M&Ms, he pulled out the bag and handed it to me. It was mildly bizarre but cool. Story 61. The number 23 may be his persona. The comedy bit might have been a gimmick, but he absolutely nailed it. Story 62. He is the brother of Sookie from True Blood. He got the role accidentally, and in interviews he is very reserved, intelligent, and bashful. He is also Australian. Story 63. Both Hugh Laurie's and Hugh Jackman's real accents sound fake as hell to me because their American accents were so convincing. Story 64. Amy Acker plays Root. Normally she is very sweet, but Root is not. Story 65. If you only know Imelda Staunton from Harry Potter, watching her in Pride is quite a shock. You keep feeling anxious, waiting for the bomb to drop, only for that fear to quickly disappear as you watch the actress become a completely different person. Many great examples appear in this thread, but for me this was the moment I truly understood what it means for an actor to have real range. Story 66. Hugh Laurie. I watched him as Dr. House throughout the entire series. Then I saw him interviewed. What the heck? You mean he is not from New Jersey? Story 67. Hugh Laurie, a posh British comedian whom I knew from a bit of Fry and Laurie, Jeeves and Wooster, and Blackadder, plays a curmudgeonly American doctor in House. Story 68. Gary Oldman in any role. He is a chameleon when he plays characters. His posture, accent, speech rate, hand movements, and personality are so different in each role that I struggle to recognize him until I see the credits. Story 69. Any actor who plays Americans really well and then turns out to be British always throws me for a loop. Story 70. Alfred Molina is an absolute teddy bear in person, terrifying on screen, and a lovely man. Story 71. Sir Christopher Lee. Knowing him as Saruman and in similar roles, it cracked me up to see him in an old Edgar Wallace movie playing a Chinese detective. Such a weird combination. Story 72. Anthony Starr from The Boys. Matthew McFadden from Succession. Honestly, there are many worthy ones. I am just adding to the list. Story 73. I'm a huge John Hamm fan. His Don Draper was amazing, and whenever I see him outside that role, I am impressed by his acting range. I even loved the insurance commercials he did years ago. Story 74. Embarrassing one for me, but I thought Kate Winslet in Eternal Sunshine used her actual accent. Story 75. Colin Farrell in The Penguin, which just premiered on HBO. Vincent D'Onofrio as Wilson Fisk. Story 76. Leonardo DiCaprio in What's Eating Gilbert Grape. I genuinely thought he was an actor with an intellectual disability when it came out. Story 77. John Lithgow going from Third Rock from the Sun to a villain in Dexter surprised me. I thought it would be terrible, but it was the best season. Highly recommend. Story 78. Hugh Laurie after House is a classic example of this. The vast majority of Americans, including myself, had no idea he was British. Story 79. Hugh Laurie's British accent and cheery disposition freak me out. Story 80. Jim Carrey. The number 23. One of his better performances that is basically forgotten because he was not a goof. Story 81. Tom Holland in The Devil All the Time. I have only seen him in Spider-Man, so seeing him in a dark, dramatic role was surprising, and he was excellent. Story 82. Hugh Laurie. I watched 5 seasons of the television show House Medical Doctor before I even knew he was British. Story 83. Denzel in Training Day. The whole movie was cognitive dissonance for me because I kept waiting for him to be revealed as a good guy. Can't believe no one else has mentioned this. Story 84. Imelda Staunton in Maleficent. I only knew her as Dolores Umbridge, so seeing her as a flighty, happy fairy was bizarre. Winona Ryder in Stranger Things. I had to check the Internet Movie Database to realize it was her after having only known her as the stylish Lydia Dietz and similar roles. Brent Spiner as the eccentric Dr. Brackish Oaken in Independence Day. I had only known him as the clean-cut, straight-laced Data. Story 85. Matthew McConaughey in True Detective, Season 1, delivered an outstanding performance. It is one of the best single seasons of television, in my opinion. Story 86. The actor who played Joffrey Baratheon on Game of Thrones is an absolute sweetheart. Unfortunately, he performed so convincingly that it damaged his career prospects early on. Story 87. Bryan Cranston went from Malcolm in the Middle to Breaking Bad. Adam Sandler went from silly comedies to uncut gems. I was surprised he could truly act. Matthew McConaughey went from typical romantic comedies to Dallas Buyers Club. Story 88. What immediately came to mind was Charlize Theron in Monster. Years later, I realized who she was and how beautiful she is in real life. Not just the difference in looks, but also in voice, accent, and mannerisms. She was absolutely outstanding in that role. Story 89. Tom Cruise in Tropic Thunder. Val Kilmer as Doc Holliday in Tombstone. Story 90. The first time I watched The Prestige, I did not realize it was David Bowie playing Nikola Tesla. It was such a cool role. Denis Villeneuve said he had intended David Bowie to play Niander Wallace in Blade Runner 2049, which would have been so cool if it had happened. Story 91. Dominic Monaghan. We started watching Lost, the television series, last week, and it threw me off not seeing him as a fun, sweet hobbit. I am used to it now, though, and I enjoy his arc so far. Story 92. Henry Cavill. When he got the role in The Witcher, I thought, what the heck, because I had only seen him in Superman. When I watched The Witcher, my jaw dropped. He was completely transformed. For all intents and purposes, he was Geralt. I later discovered he is British. Seriously talented. Story 93. David Ogden Stiers. He played Major Charles Winchester on the television show Mobile Army Surgical Hospital. I was shocked later to see him in an interview and realized he was nothing like his television character. Story 94. Actors are always acting. Even in everyday life, they play a role. Don't be deceived. Story 95. I watched John Wick and The Gift. Then I saw Keanu Reeves in real life and I was amazed. Story 96. I saw a world wrestling entertainment celebrity, the great Khali, up close. He was very tall and large but did not seem as fit as he appears on television. Story 97. When I was 18, I saw Emily Blunt in the independent film My Summer of Love. I did not see her in anything else until Victoria years later, and her acting was beyond phenomenal. Story 98. It has to be Tom Cruise when he played the dancing Tarap, profane, and aggressive movie producer Les Grossman in Tropic Thunder. Story 99. Jean Stapleton. Every aspect of Edith Bunker was her own construction. Seeing her out of character was completely jarring. Story 100. Gilbert Gottfried is very soft-spoken and sounds completely different in his normal voice. Story 101. The actor who played Bryce in 13 Reasons Why was very good and, in person, very sweet. Story 102. Most non-American actors who play American characters have real accents and voices that throw me for a loop, because I only know them as these characters, and when I see them in an interview or meet them in real life, I am taken aback by how they really sound. Story 103. Adam Sandler in Uncut Gems gave a powerful performance. Most of his films are silly comedies, but Uncut Gems was one of the first serious roles I saw from him, and I was impressed by how well he nailed it. Story 104. Larry Linville, who played Frank Burns in the television series Mobile Army Surgical Hospital, was a total sweetheart and beloved by his castmates. He played the conniving Burns so well that it is odd to see him as a decent guy in other roles. Story 105. Hugh Bonneville from Downton Abbey. I saw him in a turtleneck on Graham Norton, laughing. I can't take him seriously in that role anymore. Story 106. Stone Cold Steve Austin and Triple H were having dinner after I watched them try to kill each other a few nights ago. Story 107. Seeing Rodney Dangerfield in Natural Born Killers was my first introduction to him. About a year later, I watched Caddyshack and was very surprised. Story 108. Gabourey Sidibe played Precious. After seeing the film and watching an interview, she seemed completely opposite to the character she portrayed. Story 109. The comedian and presenter Bradley Walsh on Law and Order United Kingdom nailed the role of a former alcoholic struggling with demons while trying to do the best job he could. Story 110. Russell Crowe in Unhinged was a big change from Gladiator. Story 111. The first time I remember seeing Gary Oldman was in The Fifth Element. Once I saw how he really looked and sounded, I realized I had seen him more often than I had realized. He is an extraordinary actor. Story 112. Sophia Helen, when she plays Saga Norin in The Bridge, never smiles and stays in character so well. She is brilliant. Out of character, she is completely different. And it is surprising when she smiles. It makes me laugh. Story 113. The actress who plays Ruth in Ozark. Also the manager from Superstore. Story 114. Eric Stonestreet from Modern Family surprised me. I did not realize he was not gay in real life. Now I see him in other roles, and I am still waiting for the punchline. Story 115. Ryan Reynolds in The Captive is the only time I remember seeing him in a serious, dark movie. Think Hugh Jackman in Prisoners. Story 116. Annie Murphy in Kevin Can Fuck Himself surprised me. I had only seen her in Schitt's Creek, and she knocked a totally different character out of the water. Story 117. Vince Vaughn in Brawl in Cell Block 99. Not a great movie, but he killed it. Story 118. Pam Ferris as Miss Trunchbull in Matilda is memorable because she played a horrible character who tormented the children. The child actors did not appear to be scared working with her, so she must have warmed their hearts behind the scenes. Story 119. The actor who played Frank Gallagher in Shameless, the original English version. Story 120. Larry Drake was not well known when he started on Los Angeles Law, and many people assumed he was actually developmentally disabled like his character. Story 121. I didn't even recognize Mariah Carey in Precious. Jennifer Aniston in The Good Girl and Derailed should stick with drama. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.